I sound like I'm in a tunnel? How do I sound now? Is that better on mic 3? Okay, we'll go with the handheld. We'll go with the ice cream. Satiri's onto it. It's been a busy morning. I'm caught up in a chord now, so bear with me. I'm coming. Did you hear that? Chris just said if I want to change a tyre, I can. I've got everything covered this morning. Now, I'm using the NASAB. Yeah. What is it? National Aeronautical Space something? No. New American Standard Bible. Now, for those of you who know the story of the triumphal entry, you might know that who is this is in Matthew's Gospel. And it's a pretty important question, isn't it? We've got to know the answer to this question. It refers to Jesus. So what I'm going to do today is that I'm going to go through the study of the Gospels, excluding Mark. Well, that's just for brevity. I would love to include it, but we could be here till after lunch. But, you know, it's not the first time that it was asked in the Bible, who is this guy? So the unusual thing about the triumphal entry is not that the crowds gathered. Jesus drew a crowd to him wherever he went. And so I want to look at, you know, the examples in the Bible where it says, who is this? Who is this Jesus? And you'll see that there's some prejudices there, but we'll get to that later. And then I want to look at who does Jesus say he is? Because this is the greatest story ever told. And this is the pivot point in that story. And if we believe what happened next, then who Jesus said he was is pretty important, right? So we're going to have a look at that too. And it's a weird place to start, but this is the greatest story ever told. Christine said it in communion, it's the greatest love story ever told. But this is imitated by modern day blockbusters. Right? A hero rises. A hero faces defeat. A hero rises again. And we love it. We drink it up. Yay, hero. We want a hero. Everybody wants a hero, right? We want a hero to come in and fix everything for us. So what's the difference with Jesus? One of the differences for me is that he asks something of me. He actually does more than ask something of me. He's not going to fix everybody else. He says, I'm going to start with you. So I'm implicated. He's telling me I'm part of the problem. Do I like that? Probably not. But the thing about this story is I know it's true. And I know it's true because it tells me about me. It tells me about the world around me, and I've found nothing else that explains it as good as this. So I'm going to start, I've got a quote there from Matthew, and just to be difficult, I'm going to focus mainly on John. And I'm going to pick up a little bit about Luke, and then we'll get to Matthew, and then we'll get to some of the examples, and then we'll look at what Jesus said about himself. Now in John, He notes that the crowds are buoyed by the raising of Lazarus. This is a cultural moment, and I want to look at that cultural moment. I want to look at what's going on. Because a lot of the stuff that's going on is the same stuff that's going on today. So John notes that the crowds are buoyed by the raising of Jesus. John, Luke, and Matthew highlight the tensions with the Pharisees, Sadducees, and the political climate. So it's good to layer these things on top of one another because we get a fuller picture of the story. Now this is Holy Week, and like I said, it's pivotal. It's a pivotal point in history. And people think about it. I was taken by surprise one day, maybe about 8 to 10 years ago. I was in the office and a colleague just turned to me. It was Holy Week, I think, or just after Easter. And he turns to me and without prompting, he says, "It's interesting that they cheered for him on the weekend and by the end of the week they'd killed him." Now, I wasn't ready for that. I was probably thinking about a briefing for the government. And the best I could do was mumble, "Oh, men are fickle, aren't they?" And that's part of the story. We're fickle, right? But if that's the best I can come up with, I've forgotten to tell him that God is faithful. This is a story of God's faithfulness and man's fickleness. So if I had my time again, I'd engage him in the story. I'd ask questions. Yeah, it is interesting. What do you make of it? Why do you think people were drawn to him? And why do you think he had to die? Who is this? And here's the thing. We've got a big advantage. It's like the song that Gary often leads us in. We know how this story ends. We will be with him again. Sure, there's a cross. There's a body pierced for our transgressions, and that breaks my heart. Holy Week, when we look at Jesus, there's lament all through this, right? And so we lament. But Holy Week starts with rejoicing and it finishes with rejoicing. So we know there's a cross. And we know there's a body pierced for our transgressions, but there's an empty tomb. And Paul says, without the resurrection, we're to be pitied as fools. But a resurrection, and even more so an ascension into heaven, changes everything. We'd be silly not to take seriously what Jesus said about himself. And we know that the crowds were drawn to him. History tells us there was something extraordinary about Jesus. So people were clearly drawn to him. So I was drawn to their questions recorded in the Gospels about who they thought Jesus was. So let's just see if my little doozy what's it works. Turn it on. Ta-da! John 12 to 16, and then I've tacked verse 19 on the end as well. On the next day, when the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, they took the branches of the palm trees and they went out to meet him and began shouting, "Hosanna, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, indeed, the King of Israel." Jesus, finding a young donkey, sat on it, as it is written, "Do not fear, daughter of Zion. Behold, your king is coming, seated on a donkey colt." These things the disciples did not understand at first, but when Jesus was glorified, they remembered that these things were written of him and that they had done these things for him. Now, verse 17 and 18 go and talk about the crowd a bit more, and then we pick up in verse 19. It says, "So the Pharisees said to one another, 'You see, you are not accomplishing anything. Look, the world has gone after him.'" Now, the first thing that jumps out at me from this is in verse 16. These things his disciples did not understand at first. And as telling, because how could they? You look at the rest of the Gospels and he says, I'm going to die for you. And Peter says, no, you're not. And Jesus says, get behind me, Satan. It's pretty hard for them to grasp. But there was something else going on here as well. They wanted Jesus. There was a vacuum. They were looking for a leader. In verse 12, at the start of this, it says, on the next day. Now, if you go to the start of chapter 12, it says 6 days before Passover. So we're talking 5 days before Passover. The other interesting thing, so the start of John 12, 6 days before Passover, he's with Mary. Mary anoints him. Judas goes, the stuff you just anointed him with would cost a fortune. And so that's a bit of the backstory. So he's in Bethany, and John 11 goes on to say that Bethany is about 2 miles off of Jerusalem. So it's close to Jerusalem. And so we see again, as we follow verse 12 through, it says a large crowd heard that had come to the feast. When the large crowd that had come to the feast heard that Jesus was coming to Jerusalem, so I picked up on that. I thought, well, it's Passover. Why wouldn't Jesus come to Jerusalem? So there was clearly anticipation. They were thinking, is he going to come or is he not going to come? Well, if you look at the end of John 11, it tells you that the Pharisees and Sadducees had given orders that Jesus' location or his whereabouts needed to be reported. They thought that Jesus was going to go into hiding. And we know that in other parts of the scriptures, when they were after him, he did. He withdrew. Verse 15 quotes Zechariah 9:9, your king is coming riding on a donkey. This is a show of humility, not power. In John 16, prior to the previous Passover, it records that the crowds had wanted to take Jesus by force and make him king. And Jesus, knowing their thoughts, withdrew to the mountain. So like I said before, this is not uncommon. It's probably uncommon. It's certainly the first time he probably rode on a colt of a donkey, but he's telling people, I'm not the king that you expect. I'm ushering in a new kingdom. Verse 19. The world has gone after him. The Pharisees had a concern for the things of the world. And there's some real interesting political stuff going on here. And if you know the high priest at the time, it's Caiaphas. And after Lazarus had been raised, he brings the Sanhedrin together and he says, nor do you take into account that it's expedient for you that one man die for the people and that the whole nation not perish. Now that word expedient, having a little bit of bureaucracy in my blood and having worked in that sphere, expedient sounds bureaucratic, and it is. It is in this sense. Caiaphas was the son-in-law to Annas, I think is how you say it. Annas had previously been the high priest, and prior to Caiaphas being the high priest, there were several of Annas' sons that were high priests. The high priests were installed by Rome. And so Annas had been very good at keeping his family installed in the role. And so there's a backdrop to Jesus' entry into Jerusalem. And quite often we think that Jesus is, the people are thinking that he's coming to defeat Rome. Well, that's part of the story. The people are sick of the hierarchy's relationship with Rome. And so part of this story is their expectation that some of this is going to be overthrown. And so when Jesus goes into the temple after and he turns the tables over, they're on his side. The kids are on his side. But it tells you something here too, that there are some prejudices and there's some underlying motivations. People wanted Jesus dead. so just picking up on that, Annas and Caiaphas, I hope I'm pronouncing it right, but in John 18, after Jesus was arrested, it says that he was brought to Annas first and then to Caiaphas. This shows you the power that Annas held. He held sway politically. And if the world continued to go after Jesus, Annas and Caiaphas had a bit to lose. So let's look at what Luke says. Oh, it worked again. As he approached Jerusalem and saw the city, he wept over it. As I said at the start, there's lament here and there's lament for Jesus. He wept over it and said, "If you, even you, had only known on this day what would bring you peace, but now it is hidden from your eyes. The days will come upon you when your enemies will build an embankment against you and encircle you and hem you in on every side. They will dash you to the ground, you and the children within your walls. They will not leave one stone on another because you did not recognize the time of God's coming to you." So the key points here is that Jesus has a lament over Israel. Their leaders have led them astray. The things that they held so tightly would fail them. They held tightly to the temple. They held tightly to the treasury in the temple. They basically sold indulgences. Now we saw in John that the Pharisees had concerns that the world had gone after Jesus. Jesus had concern for Israel because they'd gone after the world. And he says the world isn't going to give you what you need. These little political alliances that they had weren't going to last. Rome goes feral. And if you know a little bit about the history that follows, like I think about 40 AD, things start to change and go pretty crazy. And there's an extreme dislike for Jerusalem. And so all these things come to be. The temple eventually falls in 70 AD, but man, it wasn't pretty for about 30 years prior to that. It was laid siege. There was insurrections. And so that's part of the story. So Annas and Caiaphas here are trying to quell a possible insurrection. They thought that if they go after Jesus, we've got problems with Rome, and we're pretty comfortable with what's happening with Rome at the moment. So we get to Matthew. So we've had the triumphal entry and people have laid their coats down and sung, "Hosanna, blessed is he and comes in the name of the Lord." And like I said before, they were looking for something different. The people outside of Rome, outside of Jerusalem, were looking for something different. But we know that there's a lot of people coming into Jerusalem for the Passover. And John tells us that those people that gathered along the side of the road were similar people that had witnessed the raising of Lazarus. So he gets into the city and there's a whole lot more people there. And they're trying to work it all out. And so the city was stirred and they say, "Who is this?" And the crowds were saying, "This is Jesus the prophet from Nazareth in Galilee." So there's, like I was saying, it's the Passover, so people come. Pentecost, people come to Jerusalem. Feast of Booths, they come to Jerusalem. 3 major feasts that bring people to Jerusalem. And we see throughout the Gospels that Jesus, being a Jew, goes to these feasts often. And he teaches, and notoriety comes his way. They can't ignore him. And his ministry from the time it first commenced, which is around the first it was around Passover 3 years prior. John says there was the wedding at Cana, and then he says after that he makes a cord and he goes in and turns the tables over in the temple and drives out the moneylenders. And so that catches the attention of the people in the temple, right? And they say, by what authority do you do this? And we see that repeated. Some people say it's the same event, but I think evidence says that it happened twice. So it happens again after his triumphal entry. And so from here he had regular run-ins with the Pharisees and the Sadducees. Now, I include the Sadducees in this because basically I reckon that Annas and Caiaphas were Sadducees, and it's probably the Sadducees that had sway in the Sanhedrin because they were more politically motivated than the Pharisees, and the Pharisees had their law and they wanted to uphold the law and they were going to hold it tight and they were going to take Jesus down by hell or high water, if that's appropriate. Now, as I said before, there's extra biblical accounts that highlights that Annas and his alliance with Rome was not well received. So Josephus speaks about this a lot, and I think that even in the Talmud or something like that, there's some verses or some prose that says, "Woe to Annas." That they didn't like him. They didn't like the alliance, just like they didn't like the tax collectors collecting tax on behalf of the Roman Empire. And the mood in Jerusalem reflected this. People wanted change. There was an appetite for change. And then, of course, there was people there that had probably no political interest at all, but they saw what Jesus was doing. They saw the power and authority that they had, and they couldn't help but go after him. So from there, I started to look at where does it say who is this in other accounts in the Bible or similar things. And so what we see is that in John 6, at the previous Passover, it's the feeding of the 5,000. And of course, if you're sitting there for however many days, and it says that Jesus had compassion on them, and he said, we've got to feed them, and the disciples go, how are we going to do that? And of course, he feeds them, and there's stuff left over. And so, in John 6:14, it says, "Therefore, when the people saw the sign which he had performed, they said, 'This is truly the prophet who has come into the world.'" Now, the reference there with prophet goes back to, I was going to say Exodus, but I think it's Deuteronomy 18:15. And Moses says to the people, "There's going to be one that comes like me." And as I said before, the reaction of the people after this, after he'd fed 5,000 people with a couple of fish and a few loaves of bread, was that we need to make this guy king. He's awesome. And they wanted to take him by force, and as I said before, he withdraws. But in John 6, he returns and he starts teaching. He says, "I'm the bread of life." And he says, "For this is the will of my Father, that everyone who sees the Son and believes in him will have eternal life, and I myself will raise him up on that last day." And the response of many of the Jewish leaders is, "Isn't this just the son of Joseph, whose father and mother we know? What's this father that he's talking about?" And so at the end of John 6, the people start to leave him because this is a hard teaching on the bread of life. And they're going, "What are you talking about?" And he says to Peter, "Do you want to leave me too?" And Peter says, "Lord, to whom shall we go? You have the words of eternal life. You are the Holy One of God." In John 7, there's some interesting stuff going on. So this is another feast. He's going off to the booths. His brothers are saying, "Go there and show them all your good stuff. You're amazing. They'll be amazed. Everybody be amazed." And of course they were. They were anyway, because he was healing the sick. He was making the blind see. He was casting out demons. People were amazed anyway. But he said, "Go and make a show." Like his brothers were saying, they didn't believe who he was, but go and make a show of yourself and take over the show. And so he says, "No, I'm not going to go. You go on ahead." And then secretly he goes in and he starts teaching in the temple, and they were amazed. So he goes humbly in instead of flouncing in, and the people are still amazed. this is the prophet. So going back to Deuteronomy 18. Others were saying, this is the Christ. But others were saying, surely the Christ is not coming from Galilee, is he? Has the scriptures not said that the Christ will come from the descendants of David and from Bethlehem, the village where David was? So there was still plenty of doubt. And like I said right at the start, how could they have known? Well, they could, because there was plenty of prophecies, but really, you know, as I was going through this, I kept saying, I'm on the other side of the cross. I've got to have some sympathy for these guys. And I guess that's the point I'm trying to make here. So if we go into Luke, and we go to Luke 4, and he goes to the temple in his hometown in Nazareth, and he gets the same response. He gets up and he reads from the book of Isaiah, and he says, the Spirit of the Lord is upon me, because he has anointed me to preach the gospel to the poor. He has sent me to proclaim the release to the captives and the recovery of sight to the blind, to set free those who are oppressed, to proclaim the favourable year of the Lord. And then he goes on to say, today this scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing. And the people that were there were amazed, but then they said, isn't this just Joseph's son? And then he goes on to say a prophet, you know, has no honour in his own town, and they pretty much cast him out. Now, in Matthew 12, this is a beauty. I mean, check this out from the Pharisees. So he casts out a demon from a demon-possessed man who was mute and deaf, and he can now speak and he can hear, and people are going, whoa. They were amazed. And all the crowds were amazed and were saying, this man cannot be the son of David, can he? But when the Pharisees heard this, they said, this man casts out demons only by Beelzebul, the ruler of the demons. And this leads to a pretty significant rebuke from Jesus. So the Pharisees, who are trying to charge Jesus with blasphemy all the time, are charged with a blasphemy that cannot be forgiven. And he refutes their argument, and he says, a house divided against itself cannot stand. Now, there's a whole sermon in this, so I'm not going to go into it too much today, but you can see that the Pharisees are pretty messed up. They don't know good from bad. I'm happy to call bad good and good bad. Sound familiar? Yeah. So Matthew 16, again, similar to the account in John, Jesus says to Peter, Peter answers a question from Jesus who asks him, who do you say I am? And Simon Peter answers, you are the Christ, the Son of the living God. And so what do we learn from these examples? Well, we know that the working class and the marginalised are drawn to him, that he had authority and wisdom that can't be denied. The only thing that they tried to do was to bring charges against his character. That's the Pharisees and the Jewish leaders. There's a whole heap of underlying motives that determine what people think about him. And again, that's the same for our age, isn't it? There's clear prejudices. They can't separate who Jesus was from where he'd come from. And we do that. I do that. If we're honest, I reckon we all do that. We look at people, we look at how they're dressed, and we go, well, we've got an understanding of where they might have come from, and you know, what good can you ever be to me? I know where you've come from, and you're not a scratch on me. But it's not true. One of the other clear things is that there was great expectation mixed with confusion. There was hope, which was confronted by fear. And this is the power of this story, is that we know at the end of the week, hope meets fear head on, and hope conquers fear. reason why I got sympathy for all these questions that people ask, and I think that people should ask questions, is that it's really hard to get your head around the eternal, isn't it? We're so caught in this time and space, and we know that God's put us in this time and space, but to make that next jump to the eternal, to say that I've come that you would have eternal life, it's like, oh, that's mind-blowing. I just can't get my head around that. I'm just going to get busy with what I'm doing here. Nicky Gumbel in his Alpha series asks people, who is Jesus? Some claim that he is Lord, and some say that he's Lord only to the Christians. Some trivialise his miracles and claim that he is a man from history and he has got a few party tricks. And it's clear from the gospel accounts that there was nothing trivial about the miracles of Jesus, and yet some could not look past his humanity. And while the Pharisees were so confident in their own righteousness, they were willing to ascribe his good works and compassion to Satan. So who do we say Jesus is? So who did Jesus say he is? So in Matthew 11, Jesus' reassurance to John the Baptist. All things have been handed over to me by my Father, and no one knows the Son except the Father, nor does anyone know the Father except the Son, and anyone to whom the Son determines to reveal him. You know, C.S. Lewis has got a quote, and this is not verbatim, this is a paraphrase. He says basically that Jesus being a good bloke or a teacher is not an option that he leaves open to us. And as we go through these things, it just isn't. It's just not an option to say that, oh, like he's a good moral teacher from back in time. He had some good things to say. Well, he did. He had some marvellous things to say. And he said, I and the Father are one. And so we look at John 4, and he goes to the Samaritan woman at the well, and the woman said to him, I know that a Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us. And Jesus said to her, I am he. Doesn't get really any clearer than that, does it? I am he, the one speaking to you. I think in John 9 he says the same thing. So this list isn't exclusive. You know, so when the blind man is healed and he goes before the Sanhedrin or something like that. John 10:10. I came that they would have life and have it abundantly. John 10:15. Just as the Father knows me and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. Got any doubts about who Jesus thought he was? Just in case you do, here's a couple more. For this reason, so John 10:17 to 18, for this reason the Father loves me, because I lay down my life so that I may take it back. I have the authority to lay it down, and I have the authority to take it back. John 10:30, I and the Father are one. John 14:6, I am the way, the truth, and the life, and no one comes to the Father except through me. John 14:7, if you had known me, you would have known my Father also. From now on, you know him and have seen him. So it's pretty clear about who Jesus said he was. He and the Father were one. So if we go back to the comment I made before, that Jesus doesn't leave an option open to us to say that he's just a good bloke. Nicky Gumbel's options are fraudster, liar, deluded, lunatic, true, and Lord. Now, after Jesus claimed in John 10 that he is the good shepherd and that he and the Father are one, the Jews pick up stones to stone him. Jesus replied to them, I showed you many good works from my Father, for which one are you stoning me? The Jews answered him, we're not stoning you for good work, but for blasphemy. The Pharisees weren't prepared to make him Lord. Now, I need to be clear here that asking questions is fine. Christianity is not a blind faith. Here's the kicker, though. If we come to the wrong conclusion, the inverse is true if we look at Nicky Gumbel's options. That is, if we say something is true and we claim it to be false, then we're deluded and fraudsters. And this is the problem that the Pharisees had when they accused Jesus of driving out demons in the name of Beelzebul. I can't pronounce it, but you know who I'm talking about. And so what do we see from Jesus? He preached the gospel to the poor. He proclaimed the release to the captives and the recovery of sight to the blind, and set free those who were oppressed. He fulfilled all the prophecies, and his character was found to be without fault. And Pilate couldn't find any fault with him. In John 2:16, in 1 John 2:16, it says, "For all that is in the world, the lust of the flesh, and the lust of the eyes, and the boastful pride of life is not from the Father, but it's from the world." Jesus' actions weren't from this world. His life is the antithesis of what's in the world. So what we see on Palm Sunday is that our Lord rode humbly on a colt into Jerusalem. He goes on, he turns over the tables in the temple, he calls out the extortion of selling the indulgences, and he himself is turned over for 30 pieces of silver. Others have tried to sell us salvation. But Jesus paid the price for our salvation. And I can't say that without getting emotional. I'm nearly at the end. I thought I was going to get through. Let me compose myself. So I'm going to start where I finished. No, I'm going to finish where I started. The Bible is the most epic story of all time. It's the story of the cosmos. It's the story of our humanity. It's the story of a father's love for his children. And at its heart is Jesus. So if you're seeking peace, let him in. He is the way, he is the truth, and he is the life. For some reason my eyes are out of focus. Now there are many in the world that are interested in Jesus. Some resist through fear. Some are overcome by pride. Some see an opportunity for extortion. Some are hurt and don't know where to turn or what to trust. Many are looking for a hero. They know the world is not as it should be. And the only way to address that is to know what's true. So who will you tell them Jesus is? And if we agree that he is Lord, then take note of what he says here. Now I can't read it with my glasses on. Got to go back a page. So take note of what he says here in Luke 6:46 to 18. Now why do you call me Lord? Now why do you call me Lord, Lord, and do not do what I say? Everyone who comes to me and hears my words acts on them. I will show you whom he is like. He is like a man building a house who dug deep and laid a foundation on the rock. And when there was a flood, the river burst again, and the river burst against that house, and yet it could not shake, because it had been well built. Contrast that to the lament he had for Jerusalem. If you hang on to the things of this world, you will be disappointed. the greatest story ever told. Promise is just something else. So this is Holy Week. Ride that lament out and know that there's joy at the end. Because we know how this story ends. We will be with him again. Thank you. You got a benediction for us?
Thanks for that great message, Tim, to remember